July. But of
Mhm.
course, that's going to be that's
Right.
going to be that's pretty much not going to happen. We're going to go to the Olympics anyway, so I don't think that thing was going to happen anyway. But
Right.
now it's being played until 2021, which so.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's kind of crazy down here. It's just the fact, I said, there's between the UFC possibly doing cards out here, but just doing it at the Apex and with no audience. And then,
Right.
like I said, I have a friend of mine who's a promoter out here that I work with a lot, and go see his cards a lot and cover his cards a lot. And so yeah, they're kind of in a like a holding pattern until what's going on goes on. So,
Mhm.
but yeah.
Seems like everything is a wash this year. Nancy, did you kick your husband off?
Off of it. He went, he diligently got off of it and is doing the phone. So I can't blame him. It could just be my computer, which is just on overdrive. So I apologize.
It seems okay right now. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's do this. Welcome to Writing and Fighting. We have a very special class. It is May 20th, 2020. I know. May has gone by fast. I don't know. March was really slow. April, and the same with March and May.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got a great class today. I'm very honored to have MarQ Piocos on. Am I saying Piocos?
No. Piocos.
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 I haven't practiced, everyone. Wait, say it one more time.
Piocos.
Piocos.
Okay, Piocos. I got it now. But actually, can I'm going to introduce you in a second. I am Nancy Kidder. I'm a professor in the literature department at American University, where I teach a class called Writing and Fighting, where we use writing and media, actually cinema as well, to learn rhetorical techniques in writing, but also kind of learn how to research and use fighting as a vehicle to understand culture and society. And I'm so happy to have my colleague, my partner, Tanisha. Will you tell everyone about yourself?
For sure. I'm Tanisha Singleton. I'm an adjunct faculty at Fielding Graduate University, where I earned my PhD in media psychology. That's the department that I teach within. And I find media psychology to be, the most comprehensive field for you to understand and interpret that human experience, especially with consideration to how we attach meaning to media and technology. And with being a lifelong sports fan, I focus all of my research primarily on sport, using it as a prompt to explore culture and influence conversation about everything that relates to sports. So from cultural media representations to fan identity, digital communication, to social advocacy and community engagement, all those things I enjoy concentrating on and working within to help promote and prompt, spaces and forums like this.
Thank you so much. All right, now we're going to get into it. We have MarQ.
Piocos.
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 You're going to help me with this. Who comes from the Wombat Sports. He's the editor and founder of Wombat Sports, which chronicles women in combat sports. We're talking wrestling, we're talking MMA, boxing, and do you also do pro wrestling?
I do some pro wrestling, actually. I just had an interview with the NWA Women's Champion a couple weeks ago.
Oh, the whole gamut. Oh, I want to hear more about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the whole gamut. And we're very honored because just recently, MarQ debuted a documentary he's been working on called Girls, Grappling, and Grit. And I was able to watch a special preview. It is amazing. You have the key players, you interview them all, who are integral in the Wrestle Like a Girl movement and other kinds of women who are helping girls get together, because as I've done some research, girls are now able to compete against other girls, and that's been a huge shift, where girls used to have to be on the men's team, but it's growing. I got some statistics I'm going to share with everyone that it's actually growing, where men's wrestling is declining in the high school level there. So I want to ask your opinion on all this because you get into it. But MarQ, can you actually tell us how you got involved in combat sports and writing about it?
I'll try to be brief on this because it's kind of a long story. I was a wrestler back in high school. I was a pro wrestling fan. I decided to go and take up the sport of wrestling. And then after high school, I went to college, and decided to get a film and television degree out of Montana State University. Then I went into becoming a news photographer for 7-8 years. Got burned out on that, decided to go on my own, became a podcaster. And then through my, through going through the news and my podcasting, I ended up catching up on, right on the, probably the precipice of where, the women's mixed martial arts movement kind of started almost. I mean, I was about maybe 5 years, maybe later than some of my predecessors. But I interviewed quite a few fighters at that time. Some of the girls that you may know right now, Misha Tate, who's currently retired. I have a really great interview with her on my website after she retired. Caitlin Young was my first interview on the podcast for that as well. So I just started falling in love with the sport in terms of the women's end of things because they brought something a little bit different than what the males are. I mean, nothing against the males, but it's a little bit different. A little bit different means a little bit different. So, so I started covering them a lot more on my podcast. Ended up writing for Fighter Girls for a little while, and then I decided to embark on my own on wombatsports.com.
Excellent. No, I'm so glad that you're using all of your training and tools, it seems, for your passion, and interest, which is women and MMA. Can we go into that? We've drilled into that with a few of our other guests to class about the difference with women's MMA. Because I know that we don't like to say that they're different in many ways, why the sport is so popular and women have been able to be so competitive in this is that they are on the same card, have the same amount of time, treated very much the same. However, there's something different about the way the fights happen, the pace, and is that something, MarQ?
I think part of it, and I'm pretty sure, pretty soon Julie will be, one of your friends, Julie Kedzie will be, agreement with me on this, is that girls tend to be a little bit more aggressive. It's kind of weird. You'd never think that the female fighters would be a lot more aggressive, but they tend to be, and they also fight a little bit differently, just because of the way that women are built. They're more flexible. So when you see scrambles, you'll be able to see submissions that are really, really tight, but for some reason they kind of wiggle out of them, and you figure that they're going to, break an arm or anything like that. I remember a fight between Michelle Watterson and Jessica Penne where I was there live, and it looked like Penne had Watterson in a very, very tight armbar, and she was able to get out of it. So, and then afterwards we asked, is your arm okay? Did you hurt your arm or hyperextend your elbow or something? She said, no, I was actually fine. So there were certain tools that women have that men's don't. So certain tools men have that women don't. So in some ways, a lot of things are a lot different in terms of where, a women's match versus a men's match, because certain physiological things are a little bit different between the men and the females. I always like the grappling aspect a little bit more, coming from my wrestling background. So, that's kind of part of what drove me there is that the women have the tendency especially back in the day, to go to the ground and really start to work some of their submissions, because a lot of these girls came from the jiu-jitsu background versus, the boxing or kickboxing background. And later on, we're starting to see more of that. Now we're seeing a lot more wrestlers being involved as well. So it's kind of interesting to see that transition as well.
No, for sure. And I wanted to jump in because it reminds me of some of the earlier conversations we've had on previous roundtable discussions in these classes about women, even from a media standpoint and covering it, that we feel like we have to try harder, right? To claim our place and that we deserve to be there. So even from a fighter perspective, if it looks like a female's like try even harder, or that they're even, you know, they're scrambling even tighter, it's that almost subjective thing in your mind where you're like, okay, well, I have to prove that I'm worthy and always being here, and I have to be perfect all the time. I have to show out. I have to be fight of the night. I have to get performance of the night or something, because there's that, well, maybe there'll never be another woman on the card, you know, like there's always going to be that what if factor. But it's interesting too, because per your point, I totally agree with you that you get more grappling, you get more clinch situations where Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu backgrounds will come into play because you're on the floor. But I'm even curious too, because just physically, if we're only talking about, you know, from 115 to 145, these are 4 divisions in between there where you're looking at small girls, you know, like with the exception of like maybe a Megan Anderson, who's a legit 6-footer. Everybody else is like 5 foot to 5'6" or something. So it's like, I'm curious what you think about adding more weight classes, if that's something, or how that might get integrated, and how that, where you see that future coming in MMA.
Well, you got to think of back in the day, back when I started out, there was very few weight classes. There was maybe featherweight and bantam. That was it.
Right.
And I keep records. I have records all the way back to 2007. I had how many of fights, of female fights, all the way up until now. And just looking at those statistics, I was able to see that, you know, quite a few things. First of all, you know, obviously with more women coming in, it wound up that 125 and 115 ended up becoming the most comfortable weight classes for women to be at. That
Sure.
was it. And I could see that, you know, 3 or 4 years ago. I could see that, you know, these gals that were fighting at maybe flyweight 125 or 115, if they wanted to go to the UFC, 135 was it. That was the only weight class that they had.
Right.
So they had, you know, so they had to go and move up in weight. But when the UFC decided to add 115, then the 115, you know, a lot of 135ers moved down to 115. Jessica Andrade being the, you know, prime example of that. And then after that, when they did the 125-pound division, you suddenly saw that the bantamweight division in the UFC lost a lot of competitors, dropping down to 125. So right now, the bantamweight division in the UFC is desperate in need of fighters. And, you know, quite a few 115ers went up, but not as many as many 135ers went down.
Right.
And then to your point about more weight classes, the atomweight division is very interesting, and it should be, it'll probably be the next weight class if the UFC decides to add another weight class in the women's divisions. It'll be atomweight, but it won't be for a while yet. It's just because they're starting to get those numbers rolling up a little bit, and just some of the things that I've seen in my statistics. Quite a few amateur fighters are fighting at 105, but they just don't have that experience yet under their belt to be able to do that. But what's been interesting is what the numbers that I saw this year was the fact that lightweight has gone up. There's a lot more lightweight fights, especially in the international scene. We've seen a MMA fight at lightweight. 2 or 3 of them out of all places Iran had 3 or 4 female bouts at, and actually 165, if I remember correctly, 165 pounds. These Iranian women fought at. So it was unusual for Iranian women to be fighting mixed martial arts in Iran, but you know, and at a higher weight. So it's been kind of crazy to be able to see that. But with the PFL having the 155-pound weight class, I've seen quite a few women across the planet that had easily fit into that 155-pound weight class. So I won't be surprised if we do see somewhat of an influx at 155 and 145 over the next couple of years. But you know, it's up to the UFC to kind of do that. And I think that Invicta is doing a great job of trying to build up their 145 division. So once they build up their 145 division, I think the UFC can easily integrate some of those talents over into their system if they decide to keep it.
Exactly. No, and we all know about Kayla Harrison. Like with the PFL, who the PFL has suspended this year. So I missed that. What was that?
I missed that.
Yeah, the PFL, like, you know, we can go into, that's a whole nother class.
I'm gonna look exactly. Well, the good news is that PFL decided to go ahead and pay their fighters for this year. So It's not like they're not going to be too bad off this year. But it's kind of sad.
Yes, because I mean, a fighter a year is like 7 years of work, that you're giving up. We think about like the fighters who've been unfairly, have USADA issues and they lose, like Josh Barnett lose, time. So Kayla, I just want Kayla to fight, and I love that you're talking about having one more lightweights, because I think that would be so interesting, But it's interesting that it's growing, and I'm sorry if I'm lagging. I'm getting a sign on my computer there. And I also think it'd be interesting to go, yes, as you said, atom weight, which that Invicta has a platform for that, as well as one FC.
And Ryzen, I just mention Ryzen as well. Some of the best atom weights in the world actually fight for Ryzen. Seoi Ham, who's probably right now the number one person at atom weight, is fighting for Ryzen right now. She defeated Ayaka Hamasaki recently. She defeated Jinyu Fry, who is right now, by the sounds of it, going to be vacating her atom weight belt, going to the UFC to fight at 115. I think a lot of people kind of to go to that point about the negative media behind women. A lot of people say they don't have power, and especially considering at atom weight. Seoi Ham has a lot of power. She's knocked out quite a few women at 105, 110 pounds. So, to have the argument that, the smaller you are, the less power you have, I think Seo and Jin both have, good arguments. The fact that that's actually not correct, because they've had knockouts under their belts.
Yeah, no, and there's always Michelle Watterson, the former Invicta champion at atom weight, who could come down and be very dangerous, I think. So it'll be interesting.
And Loma as well. Loma's currently fighting at 115 up in the UFC as well, and I actually like her better at atom weight. So yeah, it's one of those. I mean, Loma looks a little bit small for the the strawweight division up in the UFC, but Loma's just an absolute. I mean, it's crazy. She's a Thai woman, coming from mixed martial arts gym in Thailand, and her ground game is probably better than her striking game, if not on par with it. It's crazy, to say the least. So yeah.
No, it's exciting going into this, and I love that you also look at boxing, because I've always I love to have a chance to talk about women in boxing and why it hasn't gotten to where women's MMA is. And I think there are a couple factors. It's this legacy that there have been women boxers who have, were renowned in the 1700s. We had bits, in the World War II. We had some female boxers that became notable, but they're never been able to break through, and they've really seemed more like a side act. What was that?
I was going to say, my friend Melissa Smith wrote a really great book about women's history of women's boxing, is what it's called. I'm actually in the introduction of the book, which is really nice of her to do. But she has a really good book about talking about where boxing was back in the mid 1800s. Where it was in the early 1900s, Boston, they were having women learning how to box, and then there's women that were learning to do judo during the fight for suffrage. There was a lot of women that were learning to do judo.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I think women. I've had some students do historical kind of deep dives into women's in combat sports, mixed martial arts, and I mean, there were fascinating kind of statistics that kind of back up that women in self-defense, like in the 70s, this goes back to like the serial killer Ted Bundy and some things that women started entering self-defense classes. And then there's also the intersection of the number one VHS at the time, Jane Fonda's aerobics, and then that that these have all been kind of factors, and that women as athletic, powerful creatures have kind of been taking up more of that space. you know, but I'm curious what you think of women in boxing today, because we do have some breakthroughs. Clarissa Shields, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah, we have her. We have Katie Taylor, who's really popular. Probably
Irish.
the second most popular fighter out of Ireland, behind Conor McGregor, probably. Um, we've got this Amanda Serrano, who's has the most right now. I think has 7 or 8 belts right now on under her belt as well. And really, the thing with boxing, I think, is with the promotions. I mean, the way that MMA is set up is a lot different than the way boxing is set up. Mixed martial arts has a singular promotion. They have a lot more fighters, readily available to have fights on that card. I mean, the average UFC fight has 10, 12 fights at least. And you see a boxing card, you'll probably only get three, maybe 5 at the most, which is, kind of frustrating. You kind of, want to see more women in that, in that instance as well. And I think a lot of promoters are just old school thinkers. I mean, a lot of these guys are got to be in their 60s or 70s. So we haven't quite gotten a promoter yet that's been willing to really push it as much. I mean, Clarissa, I think, did a really great job of just being able to be, two-time gold medalist. I mean, that says a lot, So that kind of pushes everything. And I think the Olympics did a lot to promote, the women a lot more. I mean, I kind of wish Mary Khan would go pro because she's one of the best boxers I've ever seen. Her footwork is just absolutely amazing. But yeah, I think it's just the way that things are set up over in the boxing realm. It's just it's still the good old boys club over there. I mean, we haven't quite gotten to that point where that we have that opportunity. But that being said, Shannon Knapp is actually working on doing a all women's boxing event coming up. They were supposed to happen this year. Obviously, with what's been going on, it's kind of been delayed again. So maybe 2020, 2021, 2021, 2022, maybe we'll see an all women's boxing promotion out there at some point.
And Tanisha has to step out for her a class, but she's hopefully going to step back in. This has been, how come I don't know about this, Shannon Knapp and a all women's boxing promotion?
I mean, Shannon's been working on it for a while. She's been working on it the past couple of years. It was something that was always in her, she has a plan. She has when she started Invictus, her plan was to kind of branch out to other sports eventually, kickboxing, boxing, possibly grappling down the line too. So it was in her plans. And they just happen to get delayed. I talk to Shannon every couple months to kind of get an update on what's going on with the promotion. And she was, one of the questions I always ask her is, "Where's the boxing promotion? What do you think?" And she said, "We're hoping in a couple months. So yeah, it's one of those things where it kind of got sidelined, but she's still working on it. I think she has everything kind of in place. She's just kind of working on, how to go about it. So hopefully within the next year or two, we'll have a female boxing promotion again. I'd love to see, Bellator possibly get into that realm as well with their deal with Showtime right now. I mean, right now, by sounds of it, DAZN might be letting go of Bellator, and Bellator has been in talks to be over in Showtime now, and Showtime's in boxing. And right now, I mean, Chris Cyborg wants to make the transition over to boxing. She wants to be a world boxing champion. So that could line up pretty well if it ends up being that way. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens in the next year in terms of women's boxing.
Wow, it seems like there's an influx coming, where a lot of things are coming head to head. So you mentioned, there are a couple things I want to circle back to. You mentioned Cyborg. Think Cyborg, Clarissa Shields, or is that the fight we want? Or
I mean, Clarissa and Cyborg are really good friends, but they wouldn't mind slugging it out. There's video of Clarissa and Cyborg actually training on YouTube. You can find that on Cyborg's YouTube. But Cecilia Brækhus, who's undefeated, she defeated. She was going to face Holly Holmes before Holly Holmes decided, I'm going to go to MMA and stop doing boxing at all. So Cecilia Brækhus is undefeated. Between Cecilia, Clarissa, and Cyborg, I mean, between those three, I mean, it's pretty much, pretty much whoever wants, whatever they decide to book, I know Bellator had said that they don't want Chris boxing at the moment, but that might just be delayed a little bit, just considering what's been going on. They already have a challenger in mind for her championship in Bellator coming up. Marlene Blenclo out of Australia, who happens to be a former world boxing champion in her own right. So I don't know. We'll see.
There's so much. I cannot wait because I have to ask this question because students always ask me, Layla Ali, her versus Clarissa Shields, is that a possibility, or is that just people talk?
I think right now it's just talk. I mean, I know Layla is in really good condition. She always keeps her body in really great shape. It would take some time for her to kind of get back into the ring shape before that would even happen. But I don't know. It's one of those things. It's talk. It's like Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. We didn't think that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But ended up happening. So it could quite possibly happen if Layla is really that interested in having a fight with Clarissa Shields. All she has to do is sign her name on the dotted line and try to get at least a good 6 months to get back into training again. Funny thing, and I'll tell this to you in your class because it's an interesting side note. Gina Carano was interviewed, I think, last year. She talked about the possibility of fighting Ronda Rousey, and Dana basically had the deal in hand. He says, "We'll do it." And then Gina said, "You got to give me 6 months. I'm no way in shape in ring shape at all to go and face Ronda. So you're gonna have to give me 6 months." Well, Dana took that as a brush off and decided, nope, we're not going to do that anymore. So Gina was perfectly more than happy to face Ronda, but she needed the time to kind of get back into ring shape, as it were, and it never went to fruition.
You would hope promoters would take a lesson from that.
Yeah, exactly.
I heard that interview. I think it was with Ariel Helwani.
Yeah, it was Ariel Helwani. Yeah.
Yeah, she actually, Dana White did the ultimate mistake and texted her when he thought he was texting someone else.
Yeah.
Kind of saying that it's a brush off, probably worse language. So it's interesting. Sometimes you gotta, nurse your fighters and give them time, right? And especially if it's a fight like this, it's worth it.
Exactly.
Layla Ali is undefeated professionally. We know that Clarissa, she lost one in her Olympic run, but she won the gold, so it doesn't really matter. And then she's been undefeated professionally. Having these two come together, for me, it's a generational thing too, because I'm around the same age as Layla Ali. You gotta factor in, her heritage with someone who's been so dominant in the sport. I think it's a great fight. So I'm putting it out there,
Yeah. Like I said, it could happen. It's just gonna take time, and it's got to be that Layla's got to be really kind of dedicated to going in there and training and getting back to her boxing rhythm. If we start seeing videos of her in the gym starting to train, who knows? That's what I'm hoping. Maybe she goes on Instagram and shows that she's out there working with boxing coaches and all that, and says that she's serious about this. And I have no doubt that Clarissa is going to say yes. I'd love to fight her.
We're seeing a lot of those workout videos, right? So I never know anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
With like Mike Tyson and Mayweather, so it'll be interesting to follow. Also, I want to circle back to Mary Kom because not many people know about her, and I just wanted to give some people that how interesting a figure she is in boxing, because she comes from this remote village in India, and where women, let alone didn't have many rights, just kind of in social public spheres. She becomes a boxer and does really well, makes it to championship. And I think, Mark, she had been training for this Olympics. Yeah,
she is actually too. Yeah, and I was really excited to be able to see her fight again, because, like I said, she has some of the best foot movements that I've ever seen from a female boxer, let alone any boxer. Yeah. It was just amazing to watch her. So I was kind of almost rooting for her last time she fought in the Olympics. It was like, wow. this she has really got this. And back at the London Olympics, just to hear the audience start roaring when these women were fighting, that was an unbelievable moment. You see, and they were packed, they were sold out, and there's this roar every single time they would hit somebody. And of course, when Katie was there, obviously that was where the biggest pop was from the crowd, because being from Ireland, it's not too far away from England, and a lot of Irish live in England right now. So it's just, it's crazy to be able to see that. But yeah, Mary, I mean, I just absolutely adore her. And she's getting up there in age too.
Yeah.
But even with that, she still looks absolutely great.
Yeah. And because I made sure of this, I looked her up. She does say, it's okay, I'll take the extra year of training. So she's coming back for 2021. But I also am glad you brought up the 2012 Olympics, because this will circle back, because we got to get back to wrestling in your documentary that I really want to talk about as well. When I tell my students, I do this in class, Mark, I ask them, so when do you guys know the first year that women's boxing was introduced to the Olympics? And, I'm like, don't Google it yet, and often it'll be like, I don't know, 1920, then some people, probably like in the 60s, right? And I'm like, no, look it up. 2012. Clarissa Shields went the gold in her division, and later also in 2016. So what was that like? You said that you you probably really followed that closely.
I did. I mean, on the website, whenever the Olympics are involved, I always like to kind of cover the combat sports out of the Olympics, it being judo, taekwondo, boxing, and wrestling being the four sports that do. I always kind of watch what goes on and who all kind of goes in there as well. So, it was kind of exciting to watch the boxing, especially that year in 2012, just because of what was going on in terms of where it was being introduced, the reception it was getting there in London. So it was just crazy to be able to see and watch the way that was. So I didn't get the privilege to really watch when wrestling was introduced. What was it, 2006, I believe?
Or 2006 or 2004. No, 2006.
Yeah, it was 2004.
Oh, 2004. Okay.
Yeah. That was when Sarah won the silver.
Sarah won the silver.
Won the silver. Yep.
Yes, exactly. Well, speaking of wrestling, the year after the 2012 Olympics, I can't believe this. And you must have been probably closer to this. The International Olympic Committee, IOC, announces that wrestling is going to be taken off the list of sports starting in 2020. How in the world, because people think of Greco-Roman wrestling, that's probably it definitely was in the original Olympics, in ancient Greece. How did that happen? That wrestling, we have boxing, women's boxing premiere in 2012. So it looks like we're getting, evolving. What happened?
Really, to tell you the truth, I think it was the networks. Right now, NBC has a big deal with the Olympics, and I think that they didn't feel that the wrestling was getting enough ratings. So I think they were pressuring the Olympic Committee to kind of take it off the thing. And then when that announcement happened, people rallied very, very hardcore to bring it back. And they ended up doing that within like 6 months. They were able to appeal and go back there again. And what they did was that they said, okay, we're going to change the rules up a bit so this is more exciting for people to watch. Certain stalling calls, certain amount of points being scored or whatever. Yeah. They started to kind of rework the way that things were going to go. Another thing that they said, a lot of people were doing was like, we're going to have like WWE type entrances where people are coming in with music, like the fighters do in the UFC, kind of make everything a little bit more I don't say flashy, but a little bit more sort of showmanship there. So yeah, I think basically it was just because of the ratings were lagging a little bit, but and then like I said, they came back hardcore. It's like, okay, this is one of the original Olympic events. There's running, there's wrestling, there's I think obviously shot put and all that as well, but wrestling and running are both synonymous with, the history of what sports are. If you really think about it, down to the brass tacks, it's either a running event or some kind of combat event. You could say the javelin's technically a combat event because you're throwing a spear basically, or throwing a hammer throw or whatever. But yeah, it comes down to either, running or it's coming down to combat. So yeah, it was kind of ridiculous for them to get rid of it. So I'm glad it came back. They decided to add actually a couple more women's divisions this year, or now next year. So there'll be a couple more women's wrestling divisions coming up next year.
Yeah. Well, and let's go into women. So thankfully it's a course correction and it even ended up better. So sometimes when things are threatened, the support comes out. So tell me about Girls Grappling and Grit. What started, how you thought of putting this together.
It was a kind of an interesting and really cool kind of set of circumstances. Really, I mean, my website's always been about, the reason why I launched the website was not just only to cover the women's and mixed martial arts, but to see where the future held for it. Because, having become somewhat of a historian about, watching it grow from where it was, I wanted to see where it's going to go from here. I mean, I watched the amateur divisions, obviously, and all that as well. So I wanted to see what other sports could possibly, lead into what's been going on in terms of mixed martial arts. I did a documentary on Muay Thai. And then I did a documentary on mixed martial arts, which I'm going to have to re-edit a little bit. But then, what happened is that at the time I was living up in Montana, and a university that was about an hour away from me decided that they're going to start a women's wrestling team. So I was like going, this is a great opportunity for me to kind of cover, a women's wrestling team from their first year and kind of tell their story. So it wound up being initially me covering that, which is in the documentary. You do have a little bit of portion of that, with the University of Providence and how they did the first year that they did it. But what ended up happening is I ended up diving into a lot more with a lot more of the wrestlers that were around as well, and some stories. And I knew a lot of gals that were mixed martial artists that came from the wrestling background, and I wanted to interview them. And it just wound up being the fact that I kind of dove into a lot of these stories about these women that are going into, going into wrestling, why that is. Talking to Sally and, off and on for a couple months. We were, I was seeing what she was doing over at Wrestle Like a Girl. And then we got to the point where, things were starting to really kind of, things were starting to happen really, really quick. More states were signing on to do women's championships, girls championships in high school. More teams were being added, as well. And then that was when they were pushing for NAIA inclusion. And then they ended up getting that. And then now they're on the road to NCAA inclusion. So a lot of factors ended up happening right when I was starting to cover this team that I ended up starting covering in the documentary. So it was a very really cool kind of instance where everything kind of came together and fell into place for this documentary.
No, it is amazing because it's like you've really been able to have the origin of the movement, and then you've seen it just skyrocket. So Sally Roberts, who was a national champion wrestler, I think she was also a veteran, and she started this foundation, Wrestle Like a Girl, to kind of support women, because I think a lot of it, and this is the narrative from the stories, they're great stories, by the way, that you weave in this documentary, is that it was hard being one of the only girls on the all-male team, just because you were kind of breaking ground each time. And even though they talked about how there were stories about how the guys would get over it, right? And then, it would be very much a community. It was just that girls, a lot of them couldn't get over that barrier.
Yeah, I was trying to research this, and I think Sally would probably know more than I would about when that first female walked on a wrestling mat and wanted to compete. I mean, there was a crosstown team that actually had a female on their team, as well. So I mean, yeah, I mean, there was those things during the 80s and 90s where we're seeing, girls kind of pop up left and right wanting to be on the men's teams. What happened, strangely enough, is when we started hitting, once the women started hitting the Olympics, these girls are starting to join the team more often. There's more, they saw that they could be able to do it, to be able to join a team. And then now we're seeing in the documentary, we talked to the Northview team, which is a kind of interesting history in itself, where Tatiana Suarez from the UFC, that was her old team. It was her and another girl that wanted to wrestle, and they ended up wrestling with the boys team. And then they said, okay, let's try to get a girls team going. And they ended up, having 20 or 30 girls when I was there wrestling. So I think part of it is the barrier breaking, that, okay, well, if she can do it, I can do it too. Also the fact that there is kind of a kindredship between a sisterhood between girls now, that, okay, I'm on the wrestling team. Why don't you join me? It's a lot of fun. You get to learn a lot, and we can really, really have a lot of fun and really just learn a lot. And it's a lot of fun. I think you won't believe how fun it is until you try it. So that barrier has been starting to be breached a little bit more with a lot of these teams, especially in the bigger states, where we're seeing all women's teams, kind of commence, or more than one girl that are on the team, maybe 3 or 4 girls on the team. And that kind of camaraderie is there to kind of encourage that more girls can try out for the sport. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting situation in terms of that. And yeah, those barriers were easily broken starting in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. And if we were just seeing it now, that it's kind of skyrocketed.
I just wanted in December, there was a Wall Street Journal article that talked about how more and more states are launching wrestling championships for girls, and it's just soaring. I couldn't believe the statistic. It increased by more than 4,500 girls, or 28% last season alone. This is according to the National Federation of State High School Associations. And then it said this winter, more than half of US states will have a high school wrestling tournament for girls, either an official one, a pilot test, or one run by a coaches association. So that's huge to know that that's 28% increase. Like, I wonder what's going to be next year. I know things are, well, let's just take a pass of COVID, unfortunately, but it is incredible to see that. And I love how you say that it's fun. And what I also see, what's great for females to see this, is that their bodies often, and I won't get too much into my feminist theory or anything, but we're often valued in society for our appearance. And that's where, even when you tell a little girl, oh, you're so cute, well, that's where your value is, And so as much as we've come, and now we know women, oh, they can be sharp, they can be intellectual. We also know that their body can be strong, and that it can be this tool, as you say, because it is fun to use your body and be able to flip someone or pull someone, do a takedown, and a single leg. I think I'm getting my wrestling. So it is so interesting to see this happening. And I think it's going to continue. What do you think, MarQ?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting. The first thing I got to say was Sally in the documentary said something about women holding their space, which is a very interesting turn of phrase. Is that, women nowadays are, it's just one of those things where, you have to have that confidence behind you. She mentioned, all the successes that some of these athletes have outside of the sport. If they don't pursue the sport, but they decide to take corporate positions or whatever like that, if they can hold their own like that, then, they're going to be respected in the room. And that was a huge thing that Sally, says that a lot of these girls are getting out of it too. I mean, a lot, and also, like I said, the fact that, you have other women on there just kind of encouraging you to try your best, or try to, not feel like you're alone in trying to, work out or stay in shape. I think that's for anybody, even males, that it's tough to, on your own, try to lose weight or try to exercise or something like that. But if you have somebody right next to you trying to encourage you to run that extra lap, or try that extra sprawl, or keep on going. I mean, it's just one of those things where, I think it's very encouraging to a lot of women, and it bolsters their confidence. They feel a lot better about themselves as well. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy. The other thing I want to talk about is the fact, and in the documentary, Jess talks about this. She is worried that we're kind of in a bubble right now, because there are so many universities wanting, girls to go up into wrestling, but the high schools have yet to really fill a lot of those spots yet. Jess in documentary, just for people that obviously haven't seen it, Jess is a coach of like girls that are like, preteens. And she's coaching these girls up, and hopes that they go to high school and all that as well. But there's not very many of those programs out there for these little girls to want to go out into high school. So she's worried that we haven't got not enough programs like this to kind of go in there, and not enough coaches as well. She also talks about the male end of things, where a lot of these male coaches need to step up a little bit and start bringing in women into the wrestling room. I believe Jess's quote was, accept them equally as men, but equally as the guys, but train separately, is what she said in the documentary. But yeah, I think it's a situation where there's going to be growing pains coming from what's been going on as well. But that'll pass in the next couple years, once things kind of this next generation comes by, because we'll go into I'll segue into this. The reason why girls take up wrestling, a good portion of it is because they have friends that that are on the team. Some other are really wanting to take on another sport because they want to take up a winter sport, and they don't want to take up basketball because they may not be too tall or whatever, and they still want to do a winter sport. Well, sometimes there's not volleyball available either, so they want to try wrestling. But a good third of a good portion of the women, girls right now wanting to take up wrestling, is looking towards becoming a mixed martial artist. I mean, that's one of the things that I guess I look into trends into where everybody comes into mixed martial arts. And kind of, I always say, it's kind of almost ironic, if not really crazy, to think that Ronda Rousey, a gal that was in judo, is actually what's propelling a lot of these girls to take up wrestling, which is obviously a different sport, because these girls want to become the next Ronda Rousey. Well, what happens is they take up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then they realize, well, I want to take up another sport. So they took up wrestling because they know that's a good base sport to make it to that next level and become a mixed martial artist. So a lot of these girls, automatically say, I want to take up wrestling because I want to become a mixed martial artist when I grow up. So they'll take the wrestling first, and then, they'll add on to that as well. So what's crazy, I'm wearing Julia Salada's shirt right now. Julia, I did an interview for the documentary, didn't end up making it in, but Julia right now, I mean, she's, she was training to try out for the Olympics. So after this Olympics, she's looking to go into mixed martial arts. She was actually looking to do some amateur fights before the Olympic trials came in, but nobody wanted to fight her. She's one of the best takedown artists I've ever seen. So it'd be interesting to see her when she gets into mixed martial arts. It probably won't be until after the Olympics this coming year. But Julia wants to make that transition over, and a lot of these girls do as well. So that's kind of the interesting thing about girls wanting to take up the sport.
There's exciting, and we discussed this on another panel. The Ronda effect, another kind of ripple down from what happened with Ronda Rousey, because we talked about how that helped women in MMA. It really did, having Ronda. She was the perfect person at that moment, who was dominant for a time and had that presence, that extraordinary quality. And it's interesting to think that there were little girls watching her at that time who want to be a mixed martial artist, or finding and getting a wrestling background. So there's so many factors, and I hope that one thing I have to think about, I'm a professor at a university, so I know a little bit about, Title IX. If you bring a women's wrestling team, is that going to have to negotiate with other sports? Is that one of their hurdles? Is that there's just no room or to grow it? Do you know anything about that?
Sally went into it a little bit in the documentary. What's really cool about wrestling is that
No.
basically have to have a separate coach and basically just find out some time maybe after the men or before the men go for practice, bring the women in. I mean, it's not and if you want to travel or have meets or whatever, you can easily just bring both teams along to be able to wrestle. So there is a very low budget consideration to this. So if they got rid of a women's sport, that's more expensive, then they can always bring this in. So I think that it's a very tempting sport for a lot of colleges to have, just because it's not going to be a huge budget hurdle. So that's how it's going to be.
I never thought about that. That you don't need a field, you don't need equipment really, other than your headgear and your uniform. That is on their side as well, as that it's an economic sport. What was something that you found in this documentary that surprised you?
Really, I mean, it was really interesting to kind of see that there was a full-fledged high school women's wrestling team in California. There's quite a few of them actually, and the one I covered was just, I mean, I couldn't believe how many girls were in it. Like I said, 20 to 30 girls in that room. And it was like, wow. I mean, I didn't realize that it was, I knew that there were women that were on, like, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 women that were on men's teams. I didn't realize there were all these full-fledged teams that were just there and, taking part of this. And it was just amazing for me to see that California has a really good system going on right now. And, just to have a full-fledged women's wrestling system like that, that's something that, would be nice to see in the future, where we're going to see other states, develop these teams and all that as well. I mean, maybe Texas might be there. I know New Jersey already has a women's wrestling team system going on right now. So that was kind of surprising to see that there was a team like that was just, like I said, 20, 30 girls in a room in high school wanting to do a sport. So, and that gives them opportunities to, like I said, to go to college. A lot of these girls in this class may not have the opportunity to go to college, but they could get a scholarship and easily, go to university to get their degree. So it was just amazing for me to see that, these 20, 30 girls all in the wrestling room at the same time.
Yeah. No, those are optics that none of us have seen, right? Mm-hmm. And that changes it when you see, because what I think about is hearing about Misha Tate saying she had to join the men's team, right? Or these 1 or 2 girls that join, they're the only girl. That's my narrative that I know of girls wrestling. Mm-hmm. That would be to see a team of young girls too, because you said you preteens or, and older, and seeing them at different weight classes. And that is something. And that's why everyone needs to watch this documentary, so that we see these images. And this is something to know that this is something that, yes, it's broken through barriers and they're going, but they still need support. I mean, we just saw that wrestling was taken, all of wrestling was almost out of the Olympics. So we need to support this. So Mark, I have to ask you, you've been in touch, I'm sure, because your documentary was released last week. Mm-hmm. And you can get that on a direct streaming.
Yeah, on WombatSports.com, there's a right on the front page. There's a page that'll bring you right to the streaming link as well. So you guys can watch it. It's only $5, and I'm hoping to get at least 1,000 watches. If I get 1,000 rentals, anything after that, I'm donating portions of the profits to Beat the Streets and Wrestle Like a Girl, who are both featured in the documentary.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I encourage everyone to watch it. Have you been in touch with the teams? How are they doing in this scrambled COVID life? Because I know the teams haven't been able to train.
I have not had the opportunity to. I haven't talked to University of Providence in like a little over a year. You know, just because I'm not in Montana anymore. I'm now in Nevada at the moment. And I haven't been talking to Northview at all either. Kind of lost touch with the head coach down there. But
I'm sure they're busy, Mark. I'm sure they're like figuring out what's happening, because I know the athletes in my class, you know, the coaches don't know what's going to happen in the fall, and they're trying to keep the mental strength in there too. But
yeah, well, the cool thing is that wrestling is a winter sport, so they have some time to kind of figure out what's been going on. They've got quite a few months until they start practicing. They probably won't be starting to practice until at least October if everything, you know, turns out correctly. And then even with that, I don't know how it's going to be, just because of the contact, because it's a close contact sport. So, you know, is it going to be a situation where they have to be tested? Is it a situation where there's not going to be any people in the crowd, or, you know, all that as well? So it's very similar to what's going on with the UFC right now, and a lot of MMA promotions and a lot of the pro wrestling promotions right now. And, you know, exactly, you know, how are we going to go on with a very close contact sport and make sure that everybody's healthy for it? So, but the good news is that they have time. Like I said, it's a winter sport, so these girls aren't going to be back on the mats until maybe, you know, maybe late September, October at the earliest. So they'll have their time. They'll have some time to do that as well. I know the fighters are currently, you know, still working out wherever they can. I know that I just interviewed a fighter that went from California all the way to Albuquerque. She's hoping to have her pro debut in July. She's out of Jackson Winklejohn's, and they were hoping that the gym would be open this week to start training, but she's training off grid right now to, you know, until that ends up happening. So a lot of these athletes, you know, are finding a way to still train and all that as well. So some of these girls actually, some of the wrestlers actually do have mats in their basements sometimes. So they might even just do it on their own. A lot of these girls also are second generation wrestlers. I mean, they have fathers or uncles that are wrestlers. And so they'll get some coaching from them as well. So they'll find a way. Wrestlers will find a way.
I love it. Rolling with your dad or your uncle. You got to do what you got to do in terms of keeping up. And, you know, that's great to know that they'll find a way.
And that's interesting, just the fact that the dynamic between a father and a daughter in that instance has changed a lot. It used to be that, you know, a father might look down on the daughter for wanting to go into wrestling, or, you know, go into a boy sport like that. Nowadays, a lot of fathers are actually proud to have daughters wanting to take up a sport like wrestling, and like I said, handle themselves. You know, I mean, I'd be more trusting of it if I had a daughter. I'd be more trusting of her if she had wrestling, because I know that she can handle herself in any kind of situation. So I think that it's really great to be able to see some of these, and quite a few girls that I interviewed in the documentary also said that, you know, they were second generation wrestlers. They got it from their uncle or their you know, other brother or whatever. So
Tanisha's back.
I'm back.
Great. And I think that it's amazing, Mark. We're talking about his documentary and how he's been able to see the change, the optics of seeing a whole team of women wrestlers, pre-teens or high school, and how I know from my narrative is that you just think of the one girl on the team, right? And he said he's seen, right now he's just talking about Tanisha, and welcome back. That it's great to see fathers and parents supporting women in these roles of being, you know, using their strength, you know, instead of, oh, you know, my dad was like this, like the overprotective dad, you know, where's Nancy when we were like traveling, you know, because I had two brothers. And Mark, you're able to see a lot of social shifts going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, a lot of these girls were just talking about, you know, their fathers were or their brothers were wrestling, and they were their tackling dummies for their brothers, and they liked it so much that they decided that they wanted to do this as well. And I think that narratives have shifted. I think a lot of these fathers and these uncles or whatever are like saying, this is really good for them. And Sally kind of goes into this as well. When she said that some of the guys that are in her battalion or whatever in the army would go up to her and they would say, "I want my daughter to be like you." So I mean, that says a lot about these, where the fathers see their daughters and want them to be strong and independent. And I think that's just that narratives have shifted. Yeah, that no longer women are the weaker sex. They have the opportunity to be strong and really hold their space versus some of these guys. So it's really kind of interesting to see that being talked about a lot throughout the documentary.
I love that. That's right where I came back. And I love that it's so important, and those narrative shifts. And I can even, from personal experience, like my dad, 74, born in 1946 in San Diego. And yeah, women weren't doing this, right? But for me, like, I have an older brother, and I'll call him out because I'm pretty sure he won't be watching this, so I'll just call my brother out for it. But he's my big brother. He's 10 years older than me. He was not the athlete. They signed him up for football, and he got hit once and like called my mom and said, "Bring me a popsicle, pick me up, I'm done." Like, he did not like it. I came out literally swinging, apparently. This is the funny stories that they always say. When I was born, I came out, like already, sharpening my right hook. And my parents' house was the fight house. They always had the, boxing pay-per-views on. Friends would come over. And I was that kid that put, the tube socks on my hand and started boxing with a pillow, to show off what I could do too. And so I would always ask my dad, like beg my dad. I'm like, "Hey, he would always correct me too. He's like, "Tuck your thumb." That he'd show me how to punch. And I played everything that they let me since I could walk. So he was like, "I didn't know I was going to be able to have that sports athlete combat bond with my daughter. I thought your brother was going to be it, but he hated getting hit. And now he's a physician. Like, he's the medical doctor, and I was the one that was like, "No, let's hit me." Like, I was that one. And he, has even expressed, he was like, "I didn't know that was okay." He's like, but I saw how honest I was about it, how like he could just see that it was clear that I was like, "No, I love this. I think this is great." And he was just like, never in my life did I think that he would see this rise in women in combat sports and in athletics, period. Aside from just like, idolizing FloJo and track and field and looking at other women and rise, even, more recently, like with like Serena Williams and stuff. But it's like, when he, in his generation, he was like, never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that this was possible. So it's definitely a social and cultural shift in narrative and what's accepted. And it's so important to even recognize that is a benchmark in culture. And it takes these type of stories that you're producing and spaces like this to highlight and put shine on women and the acceptance that it's okay and that we belong and we deserve a seat at the table as well, because there is just natural raw talent as opposed to something being forced or shoved down your throat.
Yeah, Jess, I opened up the documentary on purpose with Jess Phillips's quote about girls watering down Iowa tough. And I wanted to kind of start it off that way. There's still men out there that have that predetermined notion that girls shouldn't be on the mat. They're not, they're not as tough as they seem. And Jess, kind of challenges them and says, have you ever seen a match? Have you ever seen these girls, fight? I've had girls that, were really going at it on the mat at that time, So how are you supposed to perceive, have that perception where, you have an opinion, but you don't have, you've never seen a woman fight or whatever like that, and that's how mixed martial arts was as well too. I mean, it was always considered a little special little treat on the side, to a mixed martial arts fight. But what ended up happening is that they ended up kind of rooting on their own and really kind of gaining a foothold into the UFC. Now you see like 2 or 3 fights on the UFC instead of just one. So yeah, I think that things have changed over the past decade, just watching everything that's been going on in terms of the mixed martial arts realm and now the wrestling realm. And then boxing is, I think, coming up there now. That's starting to get a little bit more respect. So I think that, I think times are changing. It's changed over the past decade. And I suspect the next decade, things are just going to get better and better in terms of the perception of what a female fighter is or a female wrestler is. And, that's just going to grow and grow. And I think women are more and more girls and women are going to take up combat sports in the long run.
I couldn't agree. Mark, I think that's a great way to end this, because we have covered everything and we can see this decade has been tremendous. We talked about some female boxing, Clarissa Shields, Layla Ali, we talked a lot about like where that's gone. And then, we talked about wrestling. You got Julia Salada, who hopefully will be in 2021, maybe some amateur MMAs if she can. To think that women started wrestling in the Olympics 2004, boxing 2012. We almost lost wrestling in the Olympics in 2013, but was saved. And to see where the growth from Ronda Rousey in 2013, kind of introducing a champion, the bantamweight in 2013. And now we have 4 weight classes, right? 115,
45. Yeah.
Well, in the UFC, there's 115, 125, 135, 145, but there's a lot more divisions in like Invicta and other places as well. PFL has 155. So yeah.
The talent will drive it for sure.
Do you know what I'd like to end on? Because I think it's one of the only female fights that we really know of, because everything's very sketch, right? May 30th somewhere. But we also have Nunes versus Felice, the Canadian, my brain.
Felicia Spencer.
There's actually 2 fights that I've heard of. That's one of them. The other one is Sarah McMahon versus Aspen Ladd coming up as well.
That's a great one. Wow. So let's get your take on, what do you think of those matches?
I'm happy that Felicia Spencer is getting that opportunity finally. Amanda is probably right now the currently active greatest GOAT right now. I go say active because I've always argued with people that Megumi Fujii is the GOAT in my opinion. It's a tough haul for Felicia Spencer. So I'd be interested to see how that goes, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to go Amanda pretty hardcore on that. Now the Aspen Ladd versus Sarah McMahon one is, my jaw dropped when that was going on. Sarah's a really good, obviously a really good wrestler. Her striking has gotten a lot better. Mm-hmm. Aspen is up and coming. She's a very young, pardon the terminology, stud right now in the ranks. And I'm interested to see how this one goes. I was interested to see kind of how if Sarah's striking becomes a lot better, if she ends up really kind of leaning on her wrestling, and kind of see how she comes into this thing. I know she's been having a rough road as of late, but it'll be interesting. If Aspen gets past Sarah, then Aspen has a pretty good shot of actually getting a shot against Amanda at 35. So yeah. I'm interested to see how that fight goes and how everybody is, affected by what's been going on in terms of training camps and all that as well, because things are kind of crazy. I mean, your training camps are kind of, almost do it yourself as work, because some of these gyms aren't open yet. So you have to have your coaches come over. You have to find a training partner. You have to, kind of improvise on the fly, as it were. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see on that one. It'll be interesting to see Nina not in Amanda Nunes' corner, because Nina right now is pregnant. And it'll be interesting because Amanda Amanda will more than likely have to isolate for at least 2 weeks while, after the fight. So, she's going to have to be away from Nina for 2 weeks. So that'll be interesting too.
Oh, great insight. Do you want to add anything, Tanisha?
Lots of layers. I love everything Mark said about that. I'm glad Felicia's getting this opportunity too, because her last bout against Cyborg, I thought she held her own and was able to take punishment, and she didn't cower, she didn't back down. She stood in the middle of the cage and tried to go with Cyborg, which is a feat in and of itself. So I'm happy to, but again, I'm happy to see her get this opportunity, but if I had to put some money on it, like, I'm gonna go Amanda.
Really? Yeah, I'm going to tell you kind of an inside thing too. I'm really looking forward to that Cyborg versus Arlene Glenclo fight. I think people underestimate Arlene. I thought she beat Julia Budd both times. She lost by split, I think majority decision the first time and split decision the second. And she's a former world boxing champion. So I think that fight's going to be closer than a lot of people think. I think it's going to be a war, and I think it's going to go 5 rounds.
Is that the date?
5-round war between those two.
When's that one?
That's got to be in.
That's next month, right? Or July?
They haven't announced a date for it yet. Bellator's still waiting on trying to find a way to go about it. I mean, they've secured a facility, a security facility in Los Angeles on the CBS slot, but they're waiting on the California Commission to say yes, go ahead and have events. And I think they just did. So I won't be surprised within the next 2 or 3 weeks. In 2 or 3 weeks, we may have an announcement from Bellator. The only problem is Arlene Glenclo is all the way down in Australia right now, so I don't think they're going to be able to let her travel. So that fight might not happen until the fall, at least. So we'll have to see what happens there. But I know that's the next fight for Cyborg. That's what they've already said. So it's just a question of when versus if.
Yeah, because Newsom did say that, we're sports, let's go, in California anyway, with no fans, obviously. So that would be interesting.
Well, we're going to see continued excitement, I think, we really don't have time to get into it, so you're going to have to come back. But the most kind of message I got on Saturday was all about the Hill fight with Gedalia. And that, Tanisha, I wonder what you think about it.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan. Not a fan. There were the 3 decisions that happened that fight. I was like, really? So, and by myself, like, really? Nobody in here? No, I'm the only one. But Twitter, it sounded pretty unanimous, but I didn't do it.
Well, we know she's going to be on like the next card in 2 weeks.
She's already asking. Yeah, she's like, damn.
Okay. And
I remember somebody tweeted that, out of the locker room, in the locker room, she already signed another 6 fights.
Yeah.
So,
it's
that's her.
Right. Yeah. And then still to not be ranked. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
But,
we lose Mark?
Where'd he go?
Hold on 1 second.
Oh. Okay. I was like, where'd he go?
Okay, hold on 1 second. There we go. I had a call come in. Don't worry about it.
No, we're ending because I have another job I have to do.
More jobs. Same here.
That's what we do. But this has been fantastic, Mark. Please come back. And I think it's been so great to really dig deep into women's combat sports. We did the wrestling, but we also did MMA, boxing, and it's delight because I could name someone and you could even like take it. Oh yeah, I know their stats and everything, or I was there. So that has been a delight. So we'll look forward to these events, and please go on his Twitter, MarQ Piocos.
She got it right. Yay!
And please watch this documentary. It's so, as you say, it's not only entertaining as you get to watch these stories all play, it's important, as Tanisha, to see these narrative shifts.
For sure.
I'll mention 2 things. One, wombatsports.com, that's where you can get the documentary. Second, not just for the documentary, but go down a couple of stories and you'll find the stats for 2019. So you'll find some really interesting stats in terms of the women's divisions of mixed martial arts, amateur and pro. they're just a, they're just a, they're just a summary, but I have a bunch of stats that I've kind of compiled as well. I also did a podcast with Laura Sanko, who was on with you a couple weeks ago as well, talking about a lot of the stats that I have as well. So I highly encourage everybody to take a look at those articles, take a look at those stats, because I know that you guys are interested in that as well. So definitely check out those as well.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Thank you, Mark, so much. Please come back and be a friend of the class. Tanisha, thank you so much for coming in and out.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry I had to, miss a big chunk of that in the middle, but
At the right time.
Absolutely. And when I get to Vegas, Mark, and we're allowed to go outside, we'll share beer.
Oh, definitely. We'll have to go to. We'll definitely catch a Toughen Up card out here too.
Please. Yes.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Have a great day. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Bye.